Debts, oh these debts, each of us has probably encountered them in our lives. It is understandable. How can we avoid debts? Because we have been taught to live in debt, adjusting to the new economic model. And therefore, most people constantly owe something to someone or someone owes them something. We are talking, first of all, of course, about monetary debts, because they are the ones that most affect our lives, both positively and negatively. Monetary debts are not a consequence of someone lending money to someone or someone borrowing money from someone. They are a consequence of the fact that the system in which you and I live obliges us to take and give money in debt. Such treatment of money is of great importance to the system. Debt is what the current world financial system is based on, and therefore the whole world. Can a person live without debt? Of course, he can. And how can he? But he shouldn't. The thing is that thanks to debt, the system works more or less stably, since debt motivates people to work, and the work people do supports the viability of the system. I am now talking about the global system, and not about its components in the form of individual countries, because you see for yourself how everything in this world has become interconnected. Therefore, the entire world system of managing people, the system of life organization of society is one single organism. And this organism needs debt, just as the human body needs oxygen to function. But this oxygen is not equally useful to all cells of the body, that is, debts help some people and harm others. How? I will give you excerpts from the Bible to show you how. You shall not lend on interest to your brother, either money or grain or anything else. You shall lend on interest to a foreigner, but you shall not lend on interest to your brother, so that the Lord your God may bless you in all that you put your hand to in the land whither you go to possess it. Deuteronomy 23 verses 19 and 20. And you shall lend to many nations, but you shall not borrow, and you shall rule over many nations, but they shall not rule over you. Deuteronomy 28 verse 12, that's it, in short. And the point is not even that someone owes someone something and therefore is their slave, because debts, in the end, can be forgiven by simply saying thank you to people for the financial assistance they provide. The point is in the slavish worldview that is imposed on a person when they are told, you owe. Only a slave can owe someone, you understand, only a slave. And most of us, from birth, owe something to someone. We must worship someone, we must serve in the army, if we are talking about men, or we must give birth to a child, or even two, if we are talking about women, and so on. I'm not even talking about all these religious commandments. If a person's brain is washed with religion, thoroughly washed, then he will turn into a thoughtless fanatic, called to serve God, whom he does not even know how to understand. Of course, it is good when people, worshipping God, adhere to behavior acceptable for a normal society, but it is bad when this behavior is thoughtless, because in this case, such people can be manipulated in various ways. Each person must understand, and not believe in why something can be done, and something cannot. Well, things are exactly the same with money. You are obliged to borrow money, at interest, and pay this interest, doing additional work for the man. You have been convinced of this, but they have not explained to you why life is arranged exactly this way, and not otherwise. This, my friends, is slavery, but it is not the point. Slavery has always existed, people do not know how to live differently. The point is how debts should work, what function, and in what way they should perform. If you think sensibly, without emotions, it will become obvious that we need to be indebted to each other. We must have some obligations to each other. We must bear a certain responsibility to each other. We must have a sense of duty. Otherwise, we will not be able to preserve our society in its current, supposedly civilized form. You see for yourself what the calls to live as you want, without any obligations, without any responsibility, etc., lead to. The cattle are degrading. However, from the point of view of the interests of each of us individually, it is quite obvious that it is much more profitable when you do not owe anything to anyone, and everyone owes you. For example, since childhood they have been hammering into my head the idea that I owe something to someone, that I can't do something and can do something else, that this is right and that is wrong, that this boy is good and that one is bad. At school, I remember, they told me that I was bad only because I fought back against some of my bullies, and they then complained to their parents, who brainwashed the teachers, who in turn didn't care who was right and who was wrong. Then, at work, in addition to the word should, they began to say must, you are obliged, you are obliged, you are a kid, they told me nobody and don't have a name. And they said similar things. What is this? It's beating up friends, bullying a person, instilling in him a sense of guilt, a sense of inferiority, a perverted sense of duty. They made a serf out of me in this way, and I must say that they succeeded in this matter. I washed myself of all this shit for years, and continue to do so to this day. Because without getting rid of all this good, a person cannot change his life, all his actions, all his reactions, thoughts, they will all be slavish if he does not clear his head of all this filth. But I, like many of you, am not against having obligations to society, to other people, to live fairly, you to me, I to you. I have never been against this, and I am not against it now. So why turn people into dirt, into shit on a shovel? Why disfigure a person with such an upbringing? Ah, that's the whole point, to squeeze more out of him later, to exploit people like stinking, weak-willed, stupid, disenfranchised cattle, who have only obligations, but no rights. So, returning to money and debts, it should be said that a person who owes money automatically begins to feel like a slave and behaves like a slave, even if he does not notice and does not understand it. This is training. With the help of debts, a person is trained. He is forced to behave in a certain way, not the most beneficial for himself. But, as I said above, slavery itself is not so scary, it has always been. What is scary is how we treat slaves, under what conditions they are exploited, and what prospects a debt-bound slave has in this world. I would not say that a person who thinks and acts like a slave can count on some outstanding success in his life. Perhaps only, like Forrest Gump, he, being a narrow-minded person, can find his place in an idiotic system, but this place will not be warm, no matter how you look at it. In general, a person who owes money, to the same bank, must get it somewhere. This is one of the goals in his life. Instead of looking for ways to succeed, he thinks about how to pay off his debts. And where and how can he get money? Well, most people know only one way to do this, and it is also the most accessible. Go sell your labor to your uncle and get a salary for your work, and from this salary the person will pay off his debts. In other words, a person who owes money to someone will work, he will be busy with business, which is what those who manage him need, and to be honest, we, ordinary people, also need it. After all, if people do not work, then they will have such a terrible thing as free time. And what do most people do with their free time? Maybe they read books, invent something, create, build? Nothing of the sort. For most people, or to be more precise, for cattle, free time is only harmful, because from idleness they begin to harm everyone, including themselves, by doing all sorts of nonsense, for example, drinking, engaging in all sorts of showdowns with each other and with others, in general, interfering with the lives of normal, creative people. Therefore, free time for a primitive creature will undoubtedly be a harmful resource. That is why they say that work made a man out of a monkey. Consequently, the reverse logic will tell us that idleness will make a man back into a monkey. In general, for the life of the current financial system and the social system in general, debts are necessary, and most of us are adapted to life only in this system. Therefore, for our life with you, debts are also necessary. For now, in any case, they are necessary until bright minds come up with something new and more perfect and lead us to a brighter future. And for now, Banks issue loans, people take these loans, spend them on all sorts of crap, then pay back these loans, earning money for this, and all this works. In general, the system breathes, the crowd is under control, the crowd creates, you can live. Debt is a whip for a ram, and the loan that this debt forms, accordingly, a carrot. True, debt is red with payment, and some people do not want to pay off their debts. Good luck, and this is of course a problem for the modern financial system, but this problem is solved in different ways, including with the help of collection agencies. You must agree that the rebellious sheep must be put back into the pen, forcing them to pay off their debts. Although the sheep themselves have a different opinion on this matter. But it cannot be otherwise. Otherwise, if everyone stops paying off their debts, chaos will set in, people will feel that everything is permissive, they will start to get impudent, they will only consume and stop working, the freebie will turn them into savages ready to gnaw everything around them. And the banking system will collapse. Try to restore order later, by democratic means, in such a mess. Then only the force of arms will pacify the primates who decided to live on freebies. You and I, as smart people, must understand this. On the other hand, many people today live in debt, up to their necks, and the situation of some of them is so deplorable that without a competent, consistent, targeted solution to their financial problems, they will never get rid of these debts and the problems generated by these debts. That is why financial advisors exist, that is why I periodically offer such a service on my website, because when a person is buried in debt and completely confused in life, when he has huge troubles in life because of debts, he cannot do without someone else's help. People, they are also not to blame for the fact that the system has taught them to live a certain life. They are trained to get into debt, trained to take all these loans, trained to live an ineffective life, the life of spendthrifts. That is why they live like this. Change this program in your head, even without having an idea of another program. Try to change your life without outside help. It is not easy to do, and for some people, with completely befuddled brains, it is completely impossible. They need help, it is obvious. The main thing is that it is obvious to them, and that they seek this help, that they ask for it. Some people don't even understand what it means to be in debt and to live in debt. They don't understand that they look at life with a worried look, that they strain themselves without any particular need. Such people think that being in debt, they gain more than they lose. I have even met people who sincerely consider loans to be a freebie, despite the fact that they pay these loans and do not try not to pay them back. Of course, people have serious, real problems when they urgently need money, and then they would like to borrow money from anyone, on any terms, to solve these problems. Such really difficult situations in life, when a person needs money like air, do not occur so often and not for all people, but many of us are hung with loans. Many of us constantly owe money to the bank. And screw the money, they constantly demand it from us, in the form of taxes, in the form of rent and so on, but this sense of duty itself, when you voluntarily agreed to obey someone else's rules for the sake of money, it creates some kind of discomfort inside. I don't know about you, but personally, I feel this feeling of discomfort. And there are people who enjoy living like this. They are all completely indebted, all in debt up to their ears, and feel like a fish in water in this system. True, they spin like a squirrel in a wheel to manage their debts, but apparently this way of life suits them just fine. Let's not interfere with them getting pleasure from life, let them spin, fuss. In general, as you probably already understood, all these loans, debts, various kinds of obligations, which we are bound to one degree or another, all these are the rules of the game by which we must play if we want to survive in this system. Those who learn to play by them will be able to make decisions in their lives that are beneficial to them. Those who do not learn will first become a slave to the system, and then possibly its victim. The system, no matter how competently it is set up, no matter how logically it works, will always grind the bones of some people, since it cannot exist without cannon fodder, just as it cannot exist without lies, violence, propaganda, debts, and similar attributes of civilized life. Therefore, no matter how necessary debts are, no matter what useful function they perform, if an ordinary person cannot competently adapt to this tool of managing society, he will destroy it. And debts are currently destroying many, and in all countries of the world. True, the media doesn't really like to cover such topics, although sometimes you can read something about how a person committed suicide because of debts, or how a person's turnip was broken for debts, or how debt collectors torture people to make them repay a loan. So you just need to look for relevant information to know more about debts and understand what exactly you are getting into when you get into these very debts. I study everything that concerns money, and not only money, so I dig deep and dig constantly, but the average person, swallowing what TV or the first positions in search engines feed him, of course, knows something different than I do. He knows exactly what he needs to know. What did you want, my friends? Isn't it the truth that a system built on lies and welded together by lies can't give you in principle? And besides, the truth is contraindicated for you, from its point of view. Just think how the economy would develop, what it would become, if all people learned to manage their finances wisely. It would lead us to a completely different life, in a completely different world. Would that world be better than the current one? I don't know, no one knows. We can only guess what it would be like. But the fact that it would be worse for those who currently live at the expense of the masses mired in debt and who control these masses is certain. Smart people are really, a thorn in the side of the current system. The system will not survive if all people become smart and start spreading the truth. Many financial institutions in it will simply fall apart, and after them everything else we are accustomed to will go down the drain. So we need to love our fools, worship them, and treat them more or less carefully. Thanks to these fools, who constantly create problems for themselves, thoughtlessly getting into debt for fun, our system is more or less stable. In addition, in the place of fools, anyone can be, because this system does not need very literate people in large numbers. If you have read my previous articles, then you should understand that there will be no loans and the debts generated by them, then there will be something else that will control people. And if we turn to the experience of past years, this something, it can be fear, dictatorship, force of arms, with the help of which the strong will exploit the weak. Why did we come up with all these debts? So that with their help some people would subjugate other people, for what else? The history of mankind can tell us a lot about how people can live, living by these or those rules. I don't know about you, but I don't really like this old thing. It's better to move towards a brighter future in the current present, without destroying anything. And the world of the future, I personally see as more perfect and more just than the present world and especially the world of the past. Our slave position, in which we constantly owe something to someone, of course, cannot be called ideal. It is a conditionally slave position, but nevertheless, it limits our freedom. And I believe that we are quite capable of avoiding many debts, simply by not making wrong, erroneous decisions for us. The problem, I repeat, is not in debts, not in the slavery associated with them, not in the credit and financial system. The problem is that this global, and along with it the local system, that is, a single country, does not treat slaves humanely. It is very dangerous to be a fool in it. This is how I see the problem. Therefore, be careful with debts, think twice before getting into them, do not dig a hole for yourself. In the end, much of what we want is not equivalent to what we really need.